Something I've heard you say is that the more important you are to them, the less likely they are to leave. So unpack that a little bit more for us.
Our business operates probably a lot more uniquely than others is we drive a lot of our clients' revenue. And so they're reliant on us to hit their revenue numbers. The more important we are to them, the less likely they're going to tell us that they're going to leave because they need us to perform at the highest level right until the day that they turn off our work and it goes to somebody else. So it is one of the most difficult things to deal with, where you think that everything could be going well, and then all of a sudden, it's not.
In the world of revenue operations, the RevOps team faces a notable problem due to not taking good care of client relationships to hit their revenue goals. They're supposed to make sales, marketing, and customer support work together, but since their main focus is not on keeping clients happy, people aren't coming back. They're not selling more stuff to current clients, and not as many new clients are being sent their way. Therefore, they're ending up with a lot less revenue than they were supposed to make for the company this quarter. No company wants to experience this. But what is the secret formula for avoiding this mishap so you can ensure that your business hits its revenue targets for the quarter? Sean Burke, COO and CCO of Prometric, has expertise in driving revenue and has a particular focus on converting bookings into in-year revenue. In this episode of the Run Revenue Show, Sean emphasizes the importance of trust and strong relationships with clients, why companies should take on a continuous learning and improvement approach, and why there should be a company-wide effort to protect the existing customer base. Listen through the episode to hear Sean's secret strategies on how he drives revenue like a pro. These tips and tricks are something you don't want to miss out on.
I'm Kyle Coleman, sales pro turned SVP of marketing at Clary. Run Revenue is the show where revenue pros learn to stop revenue leak, achieve revenue precision, and grow their companies and careers.
This is Run Revenue Show with Kyle Coleman.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Run Revenue Podcast. I'm very excited to be joined today by Sean Burke, Chief Operating Officer at Prometric. Sean, how you doing today?
I'm great, Cal. I'm glad to be here.
Likewise. We have a very meaty topic to jump into today. We're going to be talking about all around protecting the base. And before we do that, let's have the audience learn a little bit more about you. Give us the bio blast. Who are you? Where you been? What do you do today?
Sure. So we can break it into three parts. So the first part of my career was really very entrepreneurial. So started 9 companies, sold 7 of them, 2 are still in business. And I got to cut my chops from, 0 to around 20 million in revenue and learn what that's like. Then I took a little bit of a mid-career break where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so, I worked with SBI in consulting and really got to work with some of the best minds across like private equity companies and really large scale organizations that were backed by private equity. And that was just great. But I realized that I've always been an operator and wanted to get back into it. And so like the third part now of my career is operating in either a publicly traded company like LivePerson was, or a PE-backed company like Prometric is. And revenue ranges around $300 million to $400 million. Currently, because this is a Run Revenue podcast, it's probably good to give everybody like some of the stats. So Prometric, roughly a $400 million company. Most of our deals would be considered enterprise sales for the general sales community. So we have roughly 400 clients, $400 million company. So that means our average client's about $1 million, but we are heavily weighted to, about 80 of our clients represent about 92% of our revenue. So a lot of big clients. Yeah. And longer term contracts, just for those people that are listening that may sell smaller deals. That's the type of environment that we're in today.
So many different threads that we could pull. In a future episode, I want to hear about those entrepreneurial days and hear about how the heck you start 9 companies and sell 7 of them and still maintain the youthful glow that you have. But we'll save that for another time. I want to dig in to this topic of protecting the base and protecting customer revenue. And it's especially important for you, Sean, because of the customer mix that you have. 80 clients out of, you said 400 or so, that make up 92% of your revenue. So every single one of those clients is a make or break. So talk to us a little bit about how you are thinking about protecting the base and how revenue leaders should be thinking about protecting the base, mitigating churn, and finding areas for expansion.
Yeah, for us, churn is not something that we want to think about because it is way too late to focus on churn. And so we're always looking for leading indicators of future churn. In other industries, usage may be something that could be a leading indicator or percentage of time in an application. But for us, our leading indicators are things that are quite different. So for example, the things that I look at that will tell me if we're going to prevent churn are there's a standard list of operating measures that we need to make sure happen in order for us to just do the bare minimum of what our clients ask for us. And by the way, I think it's probably good to take a little sidetrack so people can picture what it is we do so that then the answers will make sense. So Prometric delivers about 7 million assessments across 14,000 test centers globally. So at any one time, there's tests going on from Japan all the way to Vancouver. And these tests are typically tests that your passing or failing of them really will dictate your future career earnings potential and set you on a trajectory of future success, or they could be extremely a big setback to you if you don't pass them. So the intensity of these people coming into our test centers it's massive. It's almost like the combine for the NFL or like trying out for the first chair of being a violinist. It is their biggest day, and we have to be extremely sensitive to them. But then we also operate in a virtual environment where we give tests virtually like you and I are, where somebody is sitting at a screen taking a test on a computer. We give tests that are delivered in one of our center, which is much more controlled. We control all the internet, we control the computer, et cetera, et cetera. We have tests that are proctored and unproctored. So we have to make sure that our operations are sound regardless of where you're at in the world, regardless of how you're coming in to the work. It's got to be secure. People can't cheat, et cetera. And that's just the baseline for us to prevent churn. Then if we look to elevate from there, like we've got to get that done. Then we look at, are we meeting the business objectives that we said that we would meet? Is their experience as a client what they expected it to be? And is their client getting the experience that they expected their client to get from us? Is the second piece of that. So the business case, the experience, and then finally, security is a big part of our business. We got to make sure that people don't cheat. They don't steal your items. They have a fair experience, that none of these tests get out in the world. And you got to do it on a 24-hour basis because of just how global we are in nature. So a lot of moving parts. And but if we do all those things right, we're in pretty good shape to protect the business. Like, it's easy, right?
Yeah, right,
things.
Of course. Just those critical things, aligning at the strategic and tactical levels with all of the people across the buying group. No problem. But a part of what you do, Sean, is you mentioned this concept of creating the win plan, this business case that your team authors and then shares with the buying group so that you are aligned strategically, so that you are aligned on what success looks like. Can you talk us through what that win plan looks like and the value that it adds for the customers?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing you should know is almost every one of our win plans is different by client. Given the size of the work that we do with our clients, they all require something nuanced in how we put it together. But the win plan is really the pieces of things that we talked about, but with some additional detail. So operationally, what are our SLAs going to be? What can you expect from us, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's the business plan. So, are we going to help you grow your program? Where are we going to help you grow it? So almost think of it as a literal business case is before you work with us, you're here. after you work with us, you're here in X and Y situation. And are we delivering on the growth plans or, penetrating certain markets? Like, are we executing on the business numbers that you expect when you came into becoming a client and then after? So are those things matching up? And when it's very common for us that when we're working with clients that we have work streams with different owners within their company and our company that align to make sure that every single one of these win plans is covered off. We all know what success looks like, and we bring our implementation and our CS organization into those discussions before we ever ink a deal to make sure that there's consistency between what was sold and then what ends up being delivered. So it does ensure that we do things, I call it measuring twice and cut once, but it does add a little bit to our sales cycle length to make sure that we're dotting all of our I's and crossing all of our T's.
I love that, Sean, and bringing that team in before the deal is finalized so that you can have paint that future vision of what they're looking for. And something that I know you're a firm believer in is that people aren't just buying technology. They're buying the partnership. They're buying the stewardship. They're buying the expertise that your team can provide. And something I've heard you say is that the more important you are to them, the less likely they are to leave. They can't leave. So unpack that a little bit more for us.
Yeah, I mean, our business operates probably a lot more uniquely than others is we drive a lot of our clients' revenue. And so they're reliant on us to hit their revenue numbers because, a large base of their revenue comes for us. But let me maybe take it in a different direction. So when you work with clients that closely, and by the way, relationships really matter. One of the other things I like to say is in a lot of cases with our clients, who we have working with them means more to them than the product or service that we offer, because they've got to have a tremendous amount of trust with us. There's also a counter to that is that the more important we are to them, the less likely they're going to tell us that they're going to leave. They will never tell us that they're going to leave because they need us to perform at the highest level right until the day that they turn off our work and it goes to somebody else. So it is one of the most difficult things to deal with, where you think that everything could be going well, and then all of a sudden it's not. And you don't always get those warning messages that they're at that point where, one next thing could cause a break in relationship. So it requires us to kind of dig in and find things out that they may not be comfortable telling us so we can address them before that occurs.
I love that way of thinking. And you said it earlier. If you are only reacting to churn, you are way too late. And there, you have to be able to see what are those leading indicators of churn. You walked us through a couple of them. I'm wondering if you can take us into maybe one of these account health reviews or into kind of the way that you're evaluating the leading indicators. Who all from your team, Sean, is involved in diagnosing account health? And what are the actions that you take? Do you have some cadenced meeting where every week there's an account health meeting, or how do you approach it?
Yeah. So with every client's approached a little bit differently. So I'll give you kind of generalities, and then we can, I'll maybe even share some specifics. So there's operating numbers that we share with our clients all the time. In fact, sometimes they share with us. So we're always sharing measurements on a regular basis, but the culmination of our work is in a QBR that we hold every quarter with our clients. And by the way, since I've joined the company 3 years ago, we've bifurcated those conversations. So one part of the conversation is all around our operating performance with them. And then the second part is all about the business relationship. Those other three things that I already mentioned, are we meeting the business plan? Are we delivering on the experience that you want and your clients want? And do we have the security in place? So those three things are all in there. And then from our standpoint and their standpoint, typically our client success and our account directors and the operating team that works day to day with our clients are in the operating portion of our QBRs, but then it is not uncommon for our entire executive team to be with their entire executive team and their operating teams to make sure that we're in alignment on that. I can't think of one of our executives that doesn't have an alignment with somebody in those 80 large accounts that we're not meeting with on a regular basis, and at a minimum in the QBR. So there's a lot of people and a lot of information shared.
How did you determine to make that split, the split between the operating performance and the business relationships, and run those topics separately? Like, did you realize that you were trying to do too much in different customer settings, or that the right audience wasn't in the QBRs, or maybe the right folks from your side weren't speaking to the right points? Like, how did you decide on that bifurcation?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think I know. What became apparent to me is when I joined Prometric, I did a kind of a whistle stop tour with all of our clients. It was really a listening tour for me. And I just, almost like this podcast, where we just asked open-ended questions and let the conversation go where it should go. And what I found is that our client's operational team felt very good about the amount of work and effort that we put together, but the executives were not getting the information that they wanted from our executive team. Like, what are some of the best practices? What are other like companies doing in this space? What are some of the things we should be investing in? What are some of the M&A things that you're looking at so we can start thinking about what acquisition you would make? And so really it was an elevation from us going from just fulfilling your operational goals to really being a strategic partner with you and making sure that we're covered there. And they'll likely, what we found is an executive will never tell you that they need to hear from you more until they're telling you that you should have been talking to me more. And so we're just being extremely proactive in that way. And we find that most of the time our CEO is talking to their CEOs at least monthly now.
It's really interesting. And I'm curious, and again, I know that some of this information is sensitive, so you can plead the fifth on this, but I'm curious to know, let's just use your CEO as an example, when they are engaged with one of your clients and it's a CEO to CEO meeting, I'd love to hear an example of whatever they discuss in that meeting ends up cascading down through the account team to the people that, hands on keyboard have to be the ones actually doing the work. How have you been able to make sure that there's a closed loop on those communications and the things that your CEOs are discussing and promising actually come to fruition inside the accounts?
Great question. So this is a process. This isn't a point in time type of thing. So every single month, our executive team meets with our account team and we debrief the entire executive team, myself included, on the state of the account. So we have operating numbers and even relationship information that we share with everyone so they know what is going on in the account. Because some of these accounts are delivering tests in China and in Canada, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And so you never want to have your executive go in a meeting and say, whoa, I didn't know that. So there's just a level of information that they need to have about the account. And then what we do is we pre-wire both executives. So the client team goes to their CEO and asks them what's on the top of mind for them. And then we filter that to our CEO and we give them what's top of mind back and forth. So there's a clear-cut agenda. By the way, some of the clear-cut agendas are, we don't want to talk about anything. Like, let's just talk about the state of business. Like, what's going on post-COVID?
Sure.
What are some of the things that you're doing? How are you attracting talent? I think a lot of our best conversations are things like that. But there's a process behind it when we're really trying to get specific in that call with the CEO to CEO, prep both sides.
It makes a lot of sense. And that the changing nature of market dynamics, the changing nature of business strategies is a key point here when you're thinking about protecting the base. Because Sean, what I've seen a lot of customer teams do is they'll create that win plan. They'll create that value journey, and then they're religious about that not changing. And that's frustrating, can be frustrating to customers. And so when things inevitably change, one, how do you root out the fact that those things are changing? It sounds like a lot of that will come from the relationships you have with your clients. So one, how do you root out those changes? And then two, how do you operationalize it? And how do you make sure that the win plan is an evolving document that is actually in service of customer needs?
It's a great question. So the first thing that we have to do is just make sure that we executed on the first win plan and make sure that that's in our rear view that says that we've accomplished all of those things. But we also run account plans with each of our account directors. So the primary interface, what we would call maybe the quarterback of all of our relationships with our clients, is the account director. And what their goal is to run an account plan, but also to make sure that they know the ever-changing needs of that client and be able to cascade that out to our client success team. By the way, it is not uncommon for us to have client success and ADs that work one account only, which because of the importance and the size and scale. I mean, some of these are small businesses. You know, if you're working with an account that does $30 million of revenue for you, that's a startup. I mean, that's a pretty long startup. And so we source it that way. So we have, we have coverage on all that. The other thing is that you have to build a process within your company. In a lot of cases, one size can't fix all because you're almost operating, in our case with, 50 to 80 unique startup businesses that are doing anywhere from 10 to 30 million a year. And if we tried to treat them all the same, none of them would be happy. The other thing that we have to control is if we treat them all differently, how do we make sure that we know across those differences, are we performing well against what makes that account unique, as well as sharing best practices across all of them to ensure that we're lifting them all. So it is every single quarter, I bring my commercial team together and we cover two things: what's going really well in our clients that we can talk about and share best practices, and then where are we missing the mark? And then we use that to go back into our AD teams and take the things that are going really well and warning them against things that are not going well. So they're always staying fresh across the globe, because what happens in China will impact the teams that are working in North America. And you can't, stick your head in the ground and pretend that they're the same. So it's really important for us to make sure that we're cross-referencing. And the way I look at it is it's almost like the flywheel approach where, you start something, you learn, you get better. And it's like this cyclical thing that we do on a regular basis. And we have weekly intervals of we're learning, quarterly intervals, annual, and we just over and over again, because some of our clients have been with us for 20 years. After 20 years, it's hard to get exponential changes when you've been working together that long.
No doubt. And on top of the client team, on top of the account directors that you have, I know that you also put a lot of stock in all the other sources of intelligence that you may have about what churn signal there is, the marketing team, the product team, the SDRs that are on the front lines. How do you make sure that you're tapping all of that knowledge and again, creating the right feedback loop so that those right things are operationalized in the churn mitigation strategy?
Yeah. So that too is a flywheel approach. So we do win-loss analysis on all of our new logo deals, and we filter those wins and loss information into our business development team, which is going out and getting new logos, as well as our account team. Because the reason why we lose opportunities could be markers for future churn in our existing accounts, because they could be needs that other clients have in the marketplace that we may not serve. The other thing is that the SDRs, and we don't use SDRs like most SaaS companies do. A lot of our SDRs are really information gatherers, because our market isn't thousands and thousands of businesses. But what they can develop with us is, if they have trust, and our BDs can do this as well, is the reason why prospects may be unhappy with their existing provider are the things that we need to protect against our own client success teams and our account teams. And they may be the unspoken needs of our clients that we could then bring to them and say, hey, look, we're hearing from the market that since COVID, these 5 things have changed. Are you finding that in your account? And so, by the way, I really love that Prometric allows me to work end to end in this business, because if these were siloed, we wouldn't be able to share this information throughout the rest of the organization, or it'd be harder. So I think it's great the way that we've structured this as a company.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Slightly switching gears here, although of course we're still talking about leading indicators and churn mitigation and things like that. Something that is inevitable is new people will join the account, or there will be turnover in champions, and it will require some reselling, or it will require something. And the buying group can expand and include personas that maybe were never included before. Certainly that's happening a lot with the office of the CFO getting involved in deals sooner and more with all the pricing pressure that exists right now. So in this environment where there are changing stakeholders and more stakeholders, more people that can fire you, how do you go about maintaining these relationships and constantly pressure testing your own account directors that they're doing the right things to engage and resell?
Great point. We almost treat new entrants to an account like a new logo account. You're going to keep it for all the operational things, but don't assume anything. Treat this night like a new logo account, because they may have their own way. Likely they were hired for a reason, or someone retired. They may have their own way of how things should work, their own examples. And one of the things that I like to say is there's more people in an account that will likely choose to fire you or to replace you than there are that bought from you. So it's not uncommon for board members or for other people that you've never even met before to have an influence on whether you stay within that account or not. And so we even create coverage plans to ask the highest level people within our organization, what feedback are you getting from your board? Because a lot of cases, the board's getting feedback. Hey, I know that you work with XYZ company. Here's our thoughts on it. And they're attuned to social media. They see things that are going on. And so we need to make sure that in board slides and in board decks that our messaging to them is the same to the team. Because if you ignore them and it comes up for time for renewal, they'll be like, I've heard all these things in the market, and it's too late to counter those things. They've already made up their mind. So it's a learning that we've had, and we've had some struggles to get there. But I think the process that we use with new people seems to work.
It's lovely. I'm going to attempt to summarize 30 minutes of wisdom, Sean, here. You've got win plans that are both operational and strategic, that are always evolving based on the intelligence that you're gathering from all corners of the business by everybody who has a market insight or a relationship with the customer. You are being hyper proactive about communication at every level with your customers, at the C level all the way down to the individual contributors. And you're making sure that the value that you're providing to all of your clients is, yes, rooted in technology, but also rooted in the partnership. And that is your pretty comprehensive approach to protecting the base and ensuring that you're going to be able to mitigate as much churn as possible before a churn event is even on the radar. Is that a fair summary? Anything you'd add to the list?
I think that's a pretty good high level. I will tell you the operational piece is very, very detailed. You think of it like there's storms in places, and my team goes from all the commercial side to delivering every one of these tests. It's amazing the things that happen that you have to be prepared for, like weather, like political unrest in certain places, like complete country shutdowns during COVID. I mean, it is, so I would say if you add those things in, plus what you said, I think you got it all.
Awesome. So that was the main topic we wanted to get through today. And I can't wait to re-listen to this so that I can actually take notes and implement a lot of this stuff. But we have one other topic, which is maybe not so much about protecting the base and more about your journey as an entrepreneur, as a company leader, as an operator, which is this open-ended question about the things that you're doing today that maybe you didn't do in the past as a revenue leader and what you would recommend, help people avoid some pitfalls, help people shortcut some of these lessons that you've learned over the years. What are you doing today that you hadn't done in the past?
And so I've worked in a lot of industries, from logistics to financial services to SaaS, telecommunications, consulting, AI, and now in the education and assessment. So the one thing that I've really put a focus on this year that I never really put this amount of focus on is the conversion of bookings, which I think most people, nomenclature is really hard in a podcast because everybody talks about things differently, but like maybe the way we could say it is new sales, converting bookings into in-year revenue, not only by timing, by percentage, by accuracy, you name it. And I actually show this number in every one of our board meetings, how we're performing in our in-year revenue as it relates to bookings, which is fantastic for us because it's a way for me to be able to call my revenue number with a lot more clarity. So that's number one. Number two, what I'm finding with our clients is, and especially in our industry, the world has very much changed since COVID, and we're trying to lay out the new world together for what testing will look like post-COVID. Before COVID, almost 100% of all of our tests were done in centers across the globe on computers, maybe some paper-based tests. Now they're delivered, online, like a meeting like this. They're delivered with a proctor, with AI, possibly. And so we've got to navigate those things together as a group. And then by far, if I were to give any CROs out there, especially new CROs, or heads of revenue, or they run the number, what I spend a lot of my time on is the interlock between my organization and the rest of the company. And I'll steal this from my days back at SBI. And then when I was doing consulting with Six Disciplines, good companies get their departmental numbers well. Great companies get their interdepartmental numbers solid. So things that, like an example of that is, what are your new sales, or what are your sales from new product launches to show that product and sales are aligned? I really feel like the best of the best take the cross-departmental numbers and really create those interlocks to make sure that the business flows through. Like, this goes back to the old days of balanced scorecard, which is probably before your time, but it's really like, to hit our financial measures, what are we going to do for the customer? What do we have to do for the product? What do we have to do from HR? And make sure that all of those things align and we're working together as a team. By the way, this year, we've really made kind of a choiceful effort to say that protecting our base is a company effort, not a commercial effort. It is a complete cultural change. We're working across all of our teams to ensure that this effort gets distributed.
I love that. And that is such an important focus. And I feel compelled to shamelessly plug Clary as the revenue platform that can allow all these revenue critical employees, a single platform, to work together to see what's going on and then to ultimately achieve these revenue targets and these revenue goals, these aspirations, whether it's bringing in new business or protecting the base. So teed me up perfectly. I couldn't resist myself,
Sure.
Sean. Last question I have for you. I asked this to everybody. I did not prep you for this. This is a surprise. I'm curious because you've seen so much, you've been all over, you have varied interests. What is the most impactful book that you've read for business, for life? Take it whatever direction you want. Fiction, nonfiction. Give me a book.
Oh, man. This isn't the sexiest book in the world. And it goes to a little bit about my Purdue background with like engineering and management and all that. And it's not even a sales book, but I literally read or listen to this book every year. It's a book called The Goal. Yeah. I've heard that Jeff Bezos used to give it out to his entire leadership team. That's not why I read it. But for me, it's around the laws of understanding your constraints in your business and trying to make, the flow of commerce through your business much better. And there's like excerpt, like it is like literally pure genius how that book is written and walks you through the challenges of running a business well. So it's the goal. And I recommend it to almost every leader that I talk to.
Okay. It's been sitting on my shelf for a couple months now. It is officially going to be at the top of the stack. Sean Burke, COO at Prometric. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Cal. It was great to be here.
Don't let what you heard today go to waste. Take 2 minutes to download today's checklist to get your priorities in line for the week. You can find that linked in our show notes. And if you liked what you heard, make sure you give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. We'll be back next Monday with more to help you win your week.